Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. Nearly 10 years ago, Simon Bedding, who owns a manufacturing company in England, picked up a copy of Boss Life, Paul Downs' memoir about running and almost losing a manufacturing company in Pennsylvania. Simon liked the book enough to email Paul, and Paul wrote back. Over the years, they've kind of stayed in touch. This year, as we mark the 250th anniversary of the United States spinning off from the United Kingdom, we thought it would be illuminating to get these two business owners together to compare notes. After all, their countries started with the same language and much of the same legal tradition. But 2.5 centuries later, running a business on opposite sides of the Atlantic can feel very different. In this conversation, Paul and Simon compare taxes, regulation, hiring, healthcare, government support, and what it's like to build a manufacturing business in their respective countries. Along the way, there are plenty of moments when one of them can't quite believe how the other has to operate. Wait, you can't fire an employee without going before a tribunal? Wait, you have to spend a week every year figuring out health insurance? Wait, your employees don't have employment contracts? And yet, for all of their differences, Paul and Simon also discover something else. Whether your factory is in Pennsylvania or Southeast England, some challenges are universal. It's hard to find great people. It's hard to fight City Hall. In short, it's hard to build a successful business. And, as Paul puts it, you're always going to learn something by talking to other business owners. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. In fact, that's the whole idea behind the 21 Hats community, engaging with other owners to get the kinds of insight only another owner can offer. If you're interested in learning more, you can sign up for the Morning Report newsletter, which offers examples 3 days a week of owners confronting challenges and seizing opportunities. We highlight the most important stories for business owners so you don't have to go looking for them. Just search the 21 Hats Morning Report to subscribe. Joining me this week on the podcast are Simon Bedding, who is director of Silmasta, which is based in Southeast England and makes pipe repair and epoxy maintenance products, and Paul Downs, CEO of Paul Downs Cabinet Makers, which is based outside of Philadelphia and makes custom conference tables. The episode is titled, Where the Grass and the Money is Greener. Before we get started, this episode is brought to you by Grasshopper Bank, a full-service digital bank. I recently had a conversation with Mike Butler, who is CEO of Grasshopper. In this portion of our conversation, I asked Mike what Grasshopper offers that more traditional banks don't. Are you a bank or a fintech or both?
We like to say that we are a fintech with a charter. Obviously, technology is a really critical part of what we do every day, and we have embraced the fintech evolution that's been going on for the last 10 or 15 years, and we can talk a lot more how we do that. But we are, a fully, FDIC chartered bank.
And you also do other things that banks do, like SBA lending, correct?
Oh, we're a full-service bank. We like to say that we're a full-service bank just without branches, and we are focused on providing the customer with that Amazon-like experience that they have become accustomed to in their day-to-day world that they don't always seem to find when they start to work in the financial services sector. So we like to say that we're the Amazon of financial services.
What are you able to do in that regard for businesses that they might not find at a more traditional bank?
Well, I think we always start with the core product that we think is important to small businesses, and that's their checking account. And so we have developed with our partners on the fintech side, we think an industry-leading and award-winning kind of platform that allows our customers to open their core DDA account in about 3 to 4 minutes per signer. And that allows them to, that right there is a big difference between working with other community banks in which you have to walk into a branch and open a checking account. Sometimes people tell us it takes over a week to get that done. So this is a 3 to 4 minute experience, no paper, that gives you access to an industry-leading digitally driven demand deposit account.
And now, on to the episode. Welcome, Paul, and our special guest, Simon. As you both know, we're doing something a little different here today. You're both manufacturers, one of you here in the US, one of you in the UK, and we're going to kind of compare notes on your experiences, your journeys, to try to get a better understanding of what it's like doing business in each of the two countries. Paul, our regular listeners know all about you, but for anyone tuning in for the first time, can you just give us a brief summary of where you are and what you do?
Sure. My company is Paul Downs Cabinet Makers. We are located just outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Currently have 25 employees. We're looking at revenues of somewhere around $5 million this year. And we make custom conference and boardroom tables, all one at a time in my workshop.
And who do you sell them to?
Sell them to pretty much everybody, from small school board in Iowa right up to the White House, and private businesses and town governments, state governments, you name it. Everybody who's looking for a custom table will eventually find us because we get most of our leads through our Google positions. We've scored high on organic search for 20-some years now. So we've dealt with pretty much everybody.
Simon, how about you? Where in the UK are you and what do you do?
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me onto your podcast. My company is Sealmaster Limited. We are based in the southeast of England. We have 15 employees and we manufacture pipe repair and epoxy maintenance products. And we make them for our own brand and also for other companies as well. We've been going for about 25 years. And our main product is a product called Seal Wrap, and it's for leak repair kits. So it's for emergency leak repair. So if you have a sudden leak on water pipes or maybe in a factory, it enables you to quickly repair and make a permanent repair on the pipe and apply composite wrap over the top and get back going again.
And who do you sell to primarily?
We sell to users all over the world. We are very big in water utilities. We supply into mines. You get a lot of leaks in mines. Our epoxy repair products are also heavily used in mining. And it's for general industry. Most of it is sold under our own Sealmaster brand. And some of our products are sold to other brands. And we do the private labeling and everything for them as well.
Can you give us a sense of how big the business is, employees, revenues?
Oh, okay, we have 15 employees and we turn over at the moment about the equivalent of $2 million US. But we've been growing quite significantly over the last few years. So we look to get much bigger than that.
So I'd love to start with just what it takes to get into business in the two countries. Paul, first, you started your business right out of college. I know a lot has changed since then, but how hard was it for you to start your business?
Well, I guess there's two ways to answer the question. One would be, how hard was it for me to decide to start a business, which was not very hard at all because I was young and stupid might be one way to put it, but just didn't really know what I was getting into. And so I found a way to start making furniture and then have been able to succeed ever since. But I think that part of what you're asking is what was the bureaucratic load? And now this is 1986, so there's no internet. There's no easy way to get a basic answer to what I need to do to be in business. But I went down to City Hall and asked some questions, and they directed me to an office. And it took about, 10 minutes to get signed up as a business in Philadelphia. Now, 7 years later, I incorporated, and that was a little more complicated. But when I was first signing up and I was down in City Hall, there were two guys ahead of me in line from Thailand. And they were also told basically the same thing, give us some money and you're good. And they could not believe it, that this was all that needed to happen. They were expecting to go down there and have to pay bribes and do this, and it would take forever. And the city of Philadelphia is like, nope, you're in. And then what neither of us realized was that once you're in, then they got their hooks in you, and the subsequent taxing experience is pretty bad, but very easy to get started and registered.
Simon, how about you? How did you come to run the business? Did you start it yourself?
No, my father actually had a business already running from home in the 90s. And I graduated from university in 2005 and realized I didn't actually want to go work for anybody. And I really wanted to try my hand at running my own business. So I thought an easy way to get into it would be to sort of join up with him and help him grow his company. At the time, he was running it from about a quarter of a double garage and a study. And what he was making adhesive products and supplying small tools into some very, very niche hobby markets. And his background had been in industrial adhesives. So after I joined, he happened to take on some larger accounts, and we began by repacking adhesives which we were buying in the garage, sometimes even in the living room or the lounge. I don't know what you guys call it, and packing people's private label products using their own brands from home. That quickly became very difficult to cope with in a house. So we bought a unit, an industrial unit in 2006, and started manufacturing products there. And over time, we started making everything ourselves. I mean, we always wanted to make everything ourselves. We've never wanted to be the kind of company to just buy stuff in and rebrand. So we slowly bought up all the industrial units around us and brought everything in-house. In 2012, we decided that we wanted to really focus on making more products in our own brand in the industrial maintenance market. We had some great pipe repair composite products, which we thought really good for the market. So we started focusing on that. Sadly, my father passed away in 2019, and it gave me an opportunity to reflect on where we were going as a company. We had a lot of different products, we had a lot of niche things. It was quite a messy range. So we got rid of a lot of the sort of small stuff, which made a lot of noise, just took up a lot of time, and focused on our composite pipe repair bandages, our epoxy putties, and our epoxy repair paste. And since then, we've gone from strength to strength. Last year, we moved out of our existing premises into one big facility, which made manufacturing a lot easier.
Simon, how did you guys connect?
It's very interesting, actually. I mentioned earlier that my father passed away in 2019. Well, prior to that, he'd been taken ill. And in 2018, we were going on a holiday to Thailand just to make some memories. And I happened to have picked up this, which happened to have been written by Paul. And it was called Boss Life. And I always like business biographies and the like. And it really connected with me. I really enjoyed reading it. It was different to most other books I'd read because it talked about numbers. It talked about the day-to-day struggles. And it was, I really, really enjoyed it. And unusually at the end, he put his email address right at the end of the book. So I emailed him. He replied very quickly, which was great of him. And then I wasn't quite so quick on my reply. Life just got a bit messy after that. And I happened to be listening to the 21 Hats podcast earlier on this year. And something struck me when I was listening to him on the podcast. I thought, I really recognize this guy. I'm pretty sure it's the same guy I emailed about, 9 years ago? So I double checked it. I thought, oh, right, yeah, it's pulled down. So I sent another email. I followed up. I replied to his email at last. And he actually apologized because it took him 4 days to reply after that. And then we just connected and got chatting. It's been a nice little bit of email correspondence going on.
So let's get into comparing notes a little bit. Paul, do you have any questions for Simon and what it's like running his business in the UK?
Well, of course I do. That's why we're having this podcast. Yes, I think that one of the things that I wanted to know more about was, in general, when you were growing up or deciding to enter a business, is small business ownership looked upon as sort of a viable and cool thing to do in Britain at the time, as opposed to maybe people were more interested in taking the safer route I think there's a real culture of lionizing entrepreneurs here in the U.S., and I wonder if anything like that exists in Britain.
Right. I think the US has a much better culture with regard to lionizing entrepreneurs, business owners, and that kind of thing. My experience growing up in the 1990s was, the general kind of attitude to business was generally okay, but it wasn't something that you'd expect somebody to go into or to, start a business. And I think the only kind of businesses that were lionized were probably sort of like ones that were fairly glamorous. When I left university and decided to go into business, I think people thought I was a bit crazy to not follow a career in finance or engineering, which was my degree. In recent years, I think it's actually become worse. I think the attitudes of the general public, this is only what I get from the media, but the attitude from the general public is the fact that you feel that their perception of business people is that we just dodge taxes, we're corrupt, in it for ourselves. As business owners, we create employment, we generate income, and we help raise the GDP. And you don't feel loved. I think there's other careers which people look up to a lot more. Whereas I imagine in the US, it's quite different. I mean, maybe my perception is different, but I certainly feel that business owners in the US are kind of looked upon as being very positive. Is that your experience?
I would say yes. Yeah. I mean, people, when you say you own your own business and they say, what is it? And I tell them what we do and like woodworking, that's cool. But they're always really taken aback when I show them that instead of just me being a guy in a garage whittling or whatever, that I have a bunch of employees and we work all over the place. That to them is extremely impressive. And I mean, I think that one thing is there's just a lot of business owners in the United States. It's not that hard to run into one. And people own all kinds of businesses. But I would say on the whole that until you get into the billionaire class, perceptions are pretty positive.
It is interesting, though, Paul. I think it's fair to say that small business owners, based on the polling I've seen, are held in extremely high regard, among the highest of any profession that you might name. But if the issue is capitalism, that seems to be on a very different track. Do you agree with that, Paul?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. Believe it or not, there's still quite a few people who believe in capitalism. And then there's quite a few who feel like they've been burned by it. But I don't think that they've necessarily experienced any alternatives in a way that would give them perspective. So our country has problems like every country. And I think it's easy to find a scapegoat. And so the overall idea of big business versus small business, I think is the perceptions are quite different. And one thing, it just occurred to me that in America, small businesses, I think they employ something like 25 or 30% of the people in the workforce.
I think it's higher than that.
Might even be higher than that. So most of the people will know somebody who works for a small business. And I don't know whether that's true in Britain at all, whether there's a solid class of companies that say run from 20 to 100 employees, and how likely you are to know somebody who works for a company like that. I don't know, Simon, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can only speak from my own personal experience, and what I'm saying may be completely disagreed with by someone else from the UK, but I don't tend to know many people who work for especially small businesses, to be honest. I think most people I know work for large companies, or they might work for a charity or something like that. You don't seem to come across it as much, and actually it's almost perceived as being a little bit unusual. You were saying when you meet someone, you tell them, oh, I run a business. On a personal basis, people actually can be quite interested, but I think they also consider it quite unusual. Normally you speak to people, they're accountants or solicitors or lawyers or something else of that ilk, or it might be in, I don't know, sales or marketing or whatever. They don't tend to meet small business owners, or particularly small businesses that manufacture things. You do get a lot of people who go off and set up their sort of boutique agencies for, say, service-based things. Not many people seem to want to go out and start making things. And as you said, grow a company to be beyond whittling something in the garage and, employing, 10, 20, 30, 40 people. It just doesn't seem to be, in my experience, as common. However, I would point out that I'm in the southeast, which is heavily influenced by London. And it's quite a wealthy part of the country. A lot of people are in professional jobs. In other parts of the country, where we have traditionally more manufacturing, that might be a completely different perception.
Simon, you said that you don't actually know that many small business owners. Paul he wrote in his book about this, and he's spoken on the podcast about it a good bit. He's been in a peer group of business owners called Vistage that he says has been tremendously helpful to him in figuring out how to build his business. Have you had anything like that? Are you part of a group?
No, maybe I should be. I've spent so many years just focusing on growing the business. It hasn't really been something I've really looked at. We have something called the Federation of Small Businesses, which is a private organisation which helps companies with maybe with sort of sorting out things like getting broadband or maybe finance and discounted insurance and things, and they try and lobby for small businesses. And again, a small business in the UK is probably what would be considered a micro business in the US, I think by probably a magnitude of 10. But there are organisations around, but not ones that I've really been involved with, and not really many manufacturers' organisations that I've been particularly involved with. I'd like to know more about yours, Paul, actually, because I haven't really heard you speak much about this.
Well, the group I was in is fairly well known in the United States, and it's a peer-to-peer recruitment process. So that may be part of why it's bigger and more prominent. It's just because the people who run the organization are constantly looking for new members. I've also been in a trade organization from a trade association that's associated with woodworking, and met a bunch of business owners there. But in general, there's a lot of different ways for people in the United States to connect with each other. There's chambers of commerce, there's industry peer groups, private peer groups like Vistage or Young Entrepreneurs or Young Presidents Organization, Entrepreneurs Organization. These companies are out looking for business owners to join because they have a revenue model and they like to sign up new people. So maybe that's just part of why America is more entrepreneur friendly, is because we not only have the companies, but we have ways to connect with each other. And I think that connection is a great way to put yourself on the path to success. And if the years when I wasn't in any business groups, I did not do so well. That was sort of ended up with the book I wrote about how hard it was to keep the doors open. And once I learned better techniques and better ways to think about what I was doing, the business became much more viable.
Did you join business organizations after you wrote the book then?
No, I joined before I wrote the book, but part of it was that I was writing for the New York Times at that time, and somebody saw my name and put me on a list, and I got invited to a meeting. And then I signed up. But that happened in the year that I was writing about, in 2012. And prior to that, I'd never really done much networking at all. But I don't know why, I just hadn't. And so I would say that one takeaway is that you're always going to learn something by talking to other business owners, whether it's something to do or something to not do. But it's tremendously valuable to start talking to more of them. So I think if you look for maybe an industry group, I think in a lot of places in the United States, you might meet other business owners through your church or through, if you got kids in school, through Little League. Anything that brings people together is a way to start to try to find peers. So that's my recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. You also, well, funny enough, you mentioned through the church being a good way. I think in the UK we don't have the similar kind of culture in that respect. I don't think church going has gone up over the last few decades. And from a school perspective, yeah, that's quite interesting. You meet meeting other parents and everything. but often they're in very different industries. But I think joining an industry association, we do have an adhesives one that might be quite interesting. Previously, when we've spoken, you've mentioned you've got the SBA as well in the US. I mean, how do you find that help?
Well, I think in a way, Lauren might be better suited to answer this. But for those who are, just in case you're not familiar, the SBA, Small Business Administration, is a branch of the federal government that's interested in helping small businesses succeed. And so they are tremendously helpful if you need to finance something. They will guarantee a loan that a bank would make. And that's a good avenue for getting funds for expansion. But Lauren, you talk to a lot of people who have all around the SBA question. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, one thing that's interesting about it is that a lot of business owners don't make use of the SBA. I think there's kind of a cultural issue there. They want to make it on their own, and they're not looking for government help. And, the government doesn't necessarily have the best reputation among entrepreneurs for being helpful. So, some people make tremendous use of the SBA. You mentioned the lending programs. There are also just general programs that offer all sorts of advice and tips for business owners from other people who've run businesses. They also provide help in government contracting work. Paul, you've done some government contracting. Have they been helpful to you in that area?
No, I never reached out to the SBA in order to get my government contracts. We kind of taught ourselves and hired some consultants, specialized consultants at a certain point. But a lot of dealing with government in the United States is just trying to figure out the bureaucratic system for each branch you're dealing with. Because we have to deal with a tremendous number of different jurisdictions, and each one has its own way of doing paperwork and invoicing and qualifying and licensing and all that. 50 states and how many municipalities, then the federal government. I'm probably registered in 40 or 50 different systems at the moment. But if SBA offers assistance for that, great, that's good. I think that what's remarkable to Simon, and Simon, you could agree or disagree, is that there is a branch of the federal government that's all about this. And my understanding is you don't have that in Britain.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I even Googled this. Google came back and said, no, there's no equivalent in the UK. We also have the problem of the fact that it seems that with every new government, they sort of tear up any previous scheme and start a new one because we don't have any consistency. So we had previous schemes which were meant to help you export. There was one called Passport to Export, which just as it was getting going, it was starting to have some benefit to us for helping you. It was giving you courses on how to export and things like that, which would have been helpful to a lot of companies. And they even had sort of mentors who could come and talk to you. And it was actually quite helpful at the time. And then they just changed everything and got rid of it all. So it was only going for a few years. So maybe I've developed a bit of cynicism because every time there's a new scheme, you think, why waste all your time really trying to learn about it and getting involved when they very quickly decide, oh, no, we're going to change everything and start all over again. That was the experience we've got. On the other hand, bureaucracy-wise, I think we're not too bad for companies. Obviously, we've got a much simpler market. We don't have loads of different state governments, etc., who all have different rules and things. Our government has also, I can't believe I'm actually complimenting them. In my opinion, they've been quite good at actually digitizing a lot of the things that you have to submit to the government. So like things like tax returns and what we call value-added tax, which is what you would call a sales tax, I guess. It all ties in with your accountancy software. It's very, very nice. It's very, very slick. They've been very good at doing everything on a very digital basis. So you can get most of the information and things, and most of the stuff you want to do can be done online, which is great. So it means you don't have to call the government up every time you want to find something out, because that's painful.
Simon, do you have an impression of what the regulatory environment is like in the U.S. for business owners?
I don't, actually. I'd be very interested to know, really. I don't know if it's more bureaucratic or if you have to deal with more regulations or what, really.
Paul, what would you say?
I think it depends a lot on where you are, because different states have different attitudes towards regulation. So personally, I've brushed up against the business environment in California and New York, and I would never want to be there. Just way too much regulation on everything. The state I'm in, Pennsylvania, is, I would say, probably on the less regulated side, particularly for my industry. So there's states that pride themselves on being low regulation, like Texas and some of the southern states. And then there's states where they feel like, we're so prosperous, nobody's going to want to move away. We're going to regulate you to death. And that's California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey. And so there's a pretty wide range. It's also driven much by what your business is. You run a restaurant, you've got to deal with the health inspector. I don't have to deal with that. So I think it's hard to characterize, but in general, if you want lower regulation, you move somewhere where there is that. And if you don't care, then you stay someplace where it's more regulated.
What about taxes? What are they like in the US? In my mind, it sounds like it's probably much lower tax, higher thresholds, etc. And I might be completely wrong. You might have a million sort of stealth taxes that sort of nibble away at your profit.
Well, Simon, why don't you go first on this one? You mentioned earlier, I think, that the general impression of the population in the UK is that business owners don't pay enough in taxes. Is that your impression as well?
No, I think we pay too much in tax. Obviously, I don't think we should pay tax at all. We do a great service to the economy by having businesses, but I guess we have to pay tax. Some of the things that are notable in the UK, which I think really inhibit growth, it always sounds very negative, but I guess every time we talk to a business owner, they always think about the problems. In terms of on a local level, we have something called business rates. So, for example, and they are normally taxed at a percentage of the rentable value of your property, thereabouts, and it's taken by the local government or the local council, we call it. So, if you had, for example, a business property and it was rented out for, say, $100,000, the tax for that, what we call business rates, would be about $45,000. And that's before you've made any profit or anything. So the day you start with that nice big factory, before you make any money, you've got to be paying those rates every single month, whether you like it or not. We don't get much in the way of any kind of reliefs unless you're very, very small. So that's the starting point. Then after that, we have obviously corporation tax. And it used to be quite good a few years ago. It was about 18 or 19%. But recently it's corporation tax. For anything above £250,000, it's 25%. For corporation tax on your profit. And if you want to take the money out of your business, obviously after that, you have to pay a tax on the dividends after that. If you want to pay yourself a salary, you pay more money. We have a tax-free threshold of about £12,500. It's about $15,000, I expect. And then by the time we get to between 50 and 125,000, your tax rate is 40%. Then over 125,000, it's 45%. But we have this wonderful thing where when you earn over £100,000, they take away the £12,500 tax-free allowance. So for the first sort of like 20 or 30,000 over 100, you actually end up taking home less money. So we've got this big sort of ceiling where there's a huge jump between the salaries between £99,000 and then I don't know 130 or £40,000 before you're starting to make the same amount of income again. Companies also have to pay a percentage of people's salary for something called national insurance. And then you also have to make your own national insurance contributions on top of all your tax as well, which I can't remember what it is now. But yeah, so we get taxed at, in my opinion, at quite a high rate at quite a low level. And there aren't a huge amount of tax reliefs. We used to have a research and development R&D tax relief, which was pretty good a few years ago. We still have it. But because some people decide to abuse the system and claim R&D tax credits for making a new menu for their restaurant and claiming the salary of the person who makes the menu or whatever, they've made it so stringent and they've made it so difficult to even claim against it now. It's almost not worth doing. I do it now, but I have to do it with a consultant, whereas before I used to do my own claims. And now it's just very hard to do that. So yeah, that's generally it for the UK. So I think it's quite punitive, quite low down. Whereas as far as I understand it in the US, you start to pay higher rates at a much, much higher kind of level of income.
I would say that we pay a lot less tax in general. A couple of years ago, I did my personal taxes, and I had made about $450,000, and the tax I paid was about 20% of that.
Wow.
Federal and state together. Now, one thing though is that I have to go buy health insurance after that, and so that is the equivalent of about 5% of my income every year. At this point in my age, to cover myself and my wife costs about $25,000 a year. So that's something that, I mean, if you're paying higher taxes, but you're getting that, then I think that it's it makes the burden a little higher for Americans than you might otherwise think.
Paul, you were referring, I think, just to what you pay to cover you and your family.
Yes, just for myself, right.
But you also are paying a percentage to cover your employees.
Well, I am, but that's a little bit different in that it's hard to come up with a formula for what it costs, other than that the younger you are, the cheaper it is to buy insurance. So a lot of my workforce is in their 20s, and their insurance costs a couple of $100 a month. It's just not nearly as expensive as my wife and I, who are near retirement age, because that's just how the rates work. As an expense to our business, the insurance coverage for my employees and their family is going to be about $140,000 this year. And that includes me and my wife. So that's going to be something like 2% of our revenues. It's not crippling. Now, it's an expense that I would much rather be able to put that money in my pocket or use it for the good of the business, but it is what it is. And I just think of it as being part of what employees cost. Like, that's what you pay them some in cash, you pay them some in insurance. They don't love getting part of their salary as insurance, but too bad. That's how it goes.
There's also a bit of a tax on your time, Paul, in that you periodically reassess whether you have the right healthcare insurance to offer your employees.
Yeah, that's like a bad week of work in the fall, figuring out the renewals and all that. But just like being familiar with the different ways the government systems work, I'm now quite familiar with how my health insurers systems work, so I can get through that fairly quickly.
But Simon, that's something that you, I assume, don't have to deal with, figuring out who to cover your employees every year.
Yeah, I mean, that I would say that's one huge benefit of being in the UK, and the fact that we have the NHS, the National Health Service. It's reasonably good. I wouldn't say it's still world class, but it certainly keeps people alive. And if you want to go to a doctor or go to the emergency room, or A&D as we call it here, you can go there quite easily. You're not going to walk out with a bill. It's a big weight off anyone's minds. And obviously, if you say you become unemployed or whatever, you're not going to suddenly not have any access to healthcare. So that's quite good in the UK. And also, we do have private health insurance, which you can use to get a better standard of care for most things, so long as they're acute and not chronic. Although that is post-tax money, you don't get a tax deduction on health insurance over here, unfortunately.
Simon, can you fire people when you want to?
Only if we want to go to an employment tribunal. No, we have to follow process and make sure that they haven't been treated unfairly. For example, if they sort of did a whistleblowing event or something, say they claimed that something you were doing something wrong as a company and you got rid of them, they would have a really good case for suing you for wrongful dismissal. The wrongful dismissal is something you have to be really, really careful of. We use an HR company to help us take us through the process, but you have to go through procedure, give people a warning, written warning, and you've just got to be very, very careful because you don't want to get rid of someone and then they sue you for whatever reason. And it's hard, you can't just sort of get rid of someone because you just don't like them anymore, you don't think they're any good or whatever. You've got to be very careful. We do have a 2-year window after people join, in which it's much easier to let them go. But even then, if they think there's been any kind of wrongful dismissal or they can claim any kind of discrimination or whatever, they could still have take an employment tribunal against you. So we just have to be very careful. It doesn't seem to be quite sort of the case where you say, right, you've done something really bad, gross misconduct or whatever, you're fired. I don't think we can do that. I mean, that's the impression I get of the US, but I'm sure it's not quite as brutal as I make it sound.
No, it's pretty brutal. I mean, I could fire anybody any day for any reason I feel like. And I may or may not have consequences. It's not automatic that someone's going to sue me for that. And I'm curious, when you say you go through the tribunal and they fine for the employee, like what's the magnitude of the fine, or do they make this person come back to your company? What happens after that?
Don't know. I haven't had a huge amount of experience. Funnily enough, my sister's company, they did go through a tribunal, and it was a very stressful event for them. Because I don't know what it's like in the US, but if you want to take your former employer to a tribunal, it's either at no cost at all, or it's a very marginal cost. I can't remember where the law currently stands because they changed it a couple of years ago. But it's quite easy to do. And I think at the end of it, he managed to get something like the equivalent of $25,000 out of him at the end. And I think he just did it because he wanted to get the money, because he wanted to go traveling. That was the reason. And he claimed like some spurious reasons for, he said he was a whistleblower or something. So I don't know how, I mean, that might seem fairly reasonably small to you in the US. I know you're quite well known for when people sue, they sue for large amounts. But I mean, obviously, for a small company, it's still a lot of money to have to sort of deal with. And also, you've got the stress of going through the whole thing and having to go to court and all the rest of it.
Wait, I have a question. Would you have the option when this person sues you of just taking them aside and say, listen, I'm going to give you $5,000 to just go away and shut up, and not have to go through the tribunal? Because that's certainly an option here.
Yeah, I think so. I think we could just do that. I mean, I'm sure they had that option. It was a while ago. I don't know exactly, but I'm pretty sure that we are able to do that. And I think a lot of the time it probably would make sense to do. Although sometimes you might just feel on principle you don't want to do it because you're feeling so sore about it. It depends how pragmatic you are, I guess.
Yeah.
Simon, do you generally have people working for you who, if it were a little bit easier to do, you would part ways with?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we've had it in the past. We've had to just very slowly manage them out and deal with them. And we had to go through a lot of sort of effort. Whereas feeling like you could say, look, this guy really or girl is really not doing the job. I'm afraid, look, let's just part ways. That's quite hard. But we haven't had to go through too much of it, to be honest. And at the moment, I can't think of anyone in my company I'd really want to do that with. And to be perfectly honest, if I felt justified in wanting to let them go, then there's probably enough justification to go through the proper due process.
What if your company isn't doing well? Can you lay people off for financial reasons?
Yes. So you can make them redundant. So yeah, if the job is no longer available to them, yeah, we can make people redundant, and then normally you pay them whatever it says in their contract. There'll be a statutory amount that you have to pay them, which accumulates the longer they've been there. But yeah, that's fine to do. I mean, so long as they don't then find out that you've just made them redundant and then employ someone in their position again, that then gets you sued again.
Does every employee have a contract?
Yes. Is that the same in the US? Is that absolutely mandatory? For us, yeah, everyone has a contract.
No, I don't have a contract with any of my employees.
Do you not? Why is that?
I don't need to. I make a written offer when I hire someone, but it's just, I'm offering you a job. You're getting paid this much an hour. Here's the benefits you're eligible for. But that's pretty much it. We don't have a non-compete. I try to not put in much in the way of description of duties, other than to say, you're being hired to do this, but we may ask you to do anything we feel like. And, if you come to work here, you're accepting that. I think a lot of it is that a contract is just, it's more paperwork than people want to do. And there's no particular advantage to it as a company owner that I can see, because it would be unusual for small companies like mine to have a contract for all the shop floor workers, for instance.
It's really interesting. I hadn't really even thought you wouldn't have it, to be honest. I think the advice in the UK is it's best practice to make sure you have got a contract, because then it will, in the eventuality that there's ever a dispute, you can say, well, these are the terms laid out in the contract. Otherwise, you just have to rely on their statutory rights and things. So at least it's sort of written down. I actually put in for certain staff who are very key, particularly sort of people who maybe up at the management level. I actually give them a longer term for on the term, the goodbye term. So I sort of make sure that they can't give us 2 weeks and then be off. I make sure they've got like a 2 month, and it works both ways. Because then if I want to ask them to leave, it gives them 2 months as well. But it gives us the benefit of the fact that then we've got 2 months for them to at least hand over the work and for us to recruit a replacement, which is great, because I have had it in the past when someone just gives you 2 weeks notice and they go, and then you're in a whole world of trouble.
Do those contracts bind an employee to you for a period of time, or is it just the 2 month quitting period?
It's just the 2 month quitting period, really. So it could be, and I've set that into the contract, even in fact for shop floor staff, just because it takes a lot of time to train them on our particular machinery, and then for them to go before training someone, it makes it very difficult for us because we have to start from scratch. It's nice to have an overlapping period.
So every company can set its own policies in its own contracts?
Yes, as long as it doesn't put them at a disadvantage against the statutory limitations that are already there. And I guess it could be argued in a tribunal, making someone give you a 6-month notice period might be deemed unreasonable. So I'm sure they could argue themselves out of the contract. And quite honestly, if someone worked for me and then they were so desperate to leave and they were really unhappy and they just wanted to go, I would not hold them to 2 months generally, because it's just not worth having someone there who's sort of unhappy, because you're not going to get much out of them. So we have had that in the past when I've let them go much earlier.
What if one of your employees is misbehaving in a way that's intolerable, and can you fire them on the spot?
I don't know, actually. It depends. I guess if someone's being like incredibly like a racist or something to that extent, I'm pretty sure we're allowed to, for gross misconduct. You can get rid of someone immediately for gross misconduct. If they're acting dangerously, or if they're being incredibly sexist or racist or something like that, then I believe that provision is there. We've never had that problem, to be honest. We've been pretty lucky with the staff, so I haven't had to go down that road. And, you have to be careful when you employ people to begin with to make sure you're not going to get an idiot. But I guess, in the US, you just get to pick and choose when you want to let someone go.
Well, I've fired people for various reasons, mostly having to do with either dishonesty or refusing to follow safety protocols. And I have to document, why did I do it? But I have on occasion fired someone within an hour of being informed of a problem. And it's never come back to bite me in any way because I'm careful about why I'm doing it. But as a business owner in the United States, you actually have quite a bit of freedom with your employees. And there's not always some easy-to-hand mechanism for that employee to come after you. I think part of that is also because there's such a number of immigrants in the United States that it's fairly easy for a boss to kind of hire people who don't know what their rights are and abuse them. And I'm not sure why that's never been addressed by the legislature, other than that a lot of prosperous businesses really rely on immigrant labor to an extent that the bosses will make sure that the current system doesn't change much. And the current system is you can hire people and pay them under the table. You can do all kinds of things to abuse your employees if you feel like it. And the likelihood that you'll pay the price, I would say, is way too low, because I hear quite a bit about people who've been abused by bosses. And I've hired a bunch of people whose previous boss was doing something that was just straight out illegal or unethical, and that's why they were looking for jobs. So I guess that's just a big difference between the United States and Britain.
Do you wish it was more stringent in the United States?
No, because if you run your company in a proper manner and treat people with basic decency, I don't really need more people breathing down my neck. And then the other thing is that having a bunch of bad bosses around in your industry is good for hiring, because when the workers realize they're being abused, they'll come work for you. And you get good workers who are quite happy to be someplace which is not terrible. And so I've hired a lot of people who were in a job situation that was just intolerable because the boss was an idiot. And I'm delighted to have those workers come work for me. So I'm not looking for much change in the system as it pertains to my company.
Do you have like statutory minimum wage? And is that federal or is that state level?
There's both, and there can be municipal level too. At the moment, we're subject to both the Pennsylvania and the United States happens to be the same thing, $7.25 an hour. Now, you can't, like $7.25 an hour gets you nothing in terms of a quality worker. So it's not even really germane to me because I could not possibly find a skilled person for that money. So we're offering double to triple that to start with. But whatever government, wherever you're located, you may well be subject to 3 sets of laws, and whichever one is the most punitive is the one you got to obey. So I know that a lot of the bigger cities are putting in $15 to $18 minimum wages, which is not unrealistic in terms of what it actually takes to survive. But it's different from how it used to be.
How is that in the UK, Simon?
The minimum wage has been going up and up and up. They've introduced something called the living wage and the minimum wage, and I think the minimum wage has to match the living wage. I'm not entirely sure why they've got two measures, but I'm sure there's a reason. Recently, the minimum wage has gone up to about £13 per hour, which is about $17 an hour, and that's across the UK for everyone. It used to be if you were younger, like below a certain age, you could be paid a lower wage. I can't remember what it is now if you don't employ anyone young enough. And actually, we don't discriminate on very new workers. We try to be quite fair. But they're trying to make it so anyone doing the same job, whether they're 20 or 40 or whatever, all have to start on the same minimum wage. And I would say it's made a difficulty for us because we always try to pay well above what the minimum wage used to be. And they keep on bringing the minimum wage up to what were previously fairly generous wages. So it makes it very hard to discriminate and be a good employer because it means we have to keep on pushing our wages up. And that can start getting quite tough. But yeah, it's a very high level for all kinds of jobs. And it stops also, meaning it stops a level of discrimination between like a fairly skilled job and a completely sort of brand new low skilled job. It's hard to sort of like create the sort of differential with the different salary levels where the minimum wage is up to that rate.
Simon, when you have an opening, do you generally feel as though you have the opportunity to hire good people to fill the opening?
No. I'm sure it's the same over there too. It's very hard to find good people. Where we are in the UK, factory work is not easy. It's not really, really like a big thing compared to, say, the Midlands or whatever. So we're already in a bad place to employ factory staff, or even if people having the mindset of saying, "Oh, I'm going to go and work in a factory." But then for advertising for jobs, you get a lot of people who don't really want the job. People have to apply for a certain amount of jobs if they want to get employment benefits. So if they're out of work, they have to kind of be shown to be applying for jobs. So we get a lot of people who are just going through the motions. So it wastes a lot of our time. We get a lot of inquiries coming from all over the world as well. So someone in India saying, "Oh, can pay to relocate me to your company in the UK?" It's like there's no chance we can do that. And then you get people it's hard to get good quality, to be honest. And we do advertise at a much higher rate than other factories and things, but it's hard to get the quality. But you do get it. Eventually you get 1 or 2 people. But if we were looking to recruit another sort of 10, 20 people in the next sort of couple of months, I think it would be hard. But I presume it's probably the same for Paul as well.
Well, yes and no. The people are attracted to the idea of being a woodworker. So we often get a lot of applicants, but very few of them will be qualified. We don't have the problem of people needing to apply for jobs to stay on the dole. So I don't see too many applications like that. But the other thing is my company itself has a pretty good reputation in the industry. It's a good place to work. So it's easier for me to hire than for people I know who run businesses, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Everybody's chasing the top of the talent pool, and it's usually when a person like that finds a job, if the owner is at all intelligent, they're going to do everything they can to keep them. So there are good workers out there. Most of them already have jobs. That's the problem. we take younger people and have to train them. We have to do a lot of training. There's no way around it.
So that's been the problem in the UK with the whole high minimum wage for school leavers. It's the fact that it's created a real unemployment problem over here, because companies are now saying, well, why should I pay the same wage to someone just out of school to someone who's going to be joining their 30s or something, who've got 10 years of experience just in the workplace? And that has genuinely made things really, really difficult. And I think we'd have a lot more opportunities for young people to be trained in production work if there was, the minimum wage was just lower for them, so they could benefit from all the training they would get and all the hand holding they would get when they join.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap this up, but I'd be curious to hear both of you answer one more question, which is, how do you define success? I'd love to have you address that both financially and more holistically. Do you enjoy what you do as a business owner, and what kind of non-financial rewards do you derive from that? Simon?
Well, you've put me on the spot there, haven't you? Yeah, I think success is probably being able to show that you've moved from one point in life to another. And then financially, I think it's the ability to have enough of an income to be able to enjoy life and not have to worry about money. So I'm not saying billions, but I'm talking about enough income so you can live a happy, comfortable life, go to a restaurant when you want.
What does that take, Simon? What's a good income for a business owner?
I don't know. Some people would probably say a few 100,000. I would say anything over 100,000 is going to start giving you quite a comfortable life. That's what I would say. Holistically, I would say, success is really about having your health, having a happy family life, having work you enjoy, and feeling like you've progressed in life.
Paul?
Well, I think that last statement of Simon is on target. You want to feel comfortable and that you've succeeded. I think that money-wise, probably the threshold for that same, I'm settled, I'm doing well, is going to vary, again, tremendously based on where you are. But let's just say, for chuckles, $250,000 a year is the beginning of me feeling comfortable. And that puts me in something like the upper 10% of all income in the United States, and a long way from very successful. But I think the main thing being that success for me has been watching my company grow, seeing others join the company and have a good place to work and good colleagues, and able to make some money themselves. And I have a lot of personal freedom and autonomy with what I do with my time. And I've been blessed with a happy marriage and a lovely family. So I'm pretty successful. Thank you. Whoever delivered all that to me. It wasn't all me. There was some luck in there.
Paul, I totally agree. Being able to have freedom, I think, is the most important thing. And actually, you're right. I take great pride in when I look at the people who work for me. We're only a small company still. But the fact that people's mortgages are being paid, people are being able to live, people are able to do things, that gives you a great sense of achievement. To think that all these people are employed because of the company that we're growing.
That's a great note to end on. My thanks to Paul Downs and Simon Betting, and to our sponsor. This episode was brought to you by Grasshopper Bank. And thanks for listening, everybody. One thing before you go. Everything we do at 21 Hats is created by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs to help us all learn together. If you get something out of listening to these podcast episodes, consider joining the conversation. You can do that by joining the 21 Hats Sounding Board, a Slack channel where you can tap the wisdom of a very smart crowd, or by becoming a founding member and joining our monthly Zoom forum, where you can be part of conversations much like the ones we have on the podcast. You can sign up for both by subscribing to the Morning Report. If you have any questions, you can email me at lauren@21hats.com. And if you get something out of this podcast or out of the Morning Report, please tell a friend, tell an enemy, tell every business owner you know. Your word of mouth, owner to owner, will always be the most effective way to build this community for all of us. Thank you. It means a lot. This episode was produced by another entrepreneur, Jess Stuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Thanks for listening, everyone.